Much for doing this. I'm
Well,
so grateful.
thank you for asking me, Vicki.
Well, see, I told you Steve Ferroni was going to come. Look at this. Oh my God, he did it again. Oh my God, he does that every time. I know that you're doing this under, I don't want to say duress, but under a little bit of pressure because we have a mutual person. So, Tom, tell me how you met Snuffy because he doesn't even remember.
Snuffy is one of the best people I've ever met in my life. You know that. And he is a great musician and a great, whatever it is, scoring shows. But he's sober a long time. And he's been very helpful to people like myself, very kind. And I met him, I would say, over 30 years ago.
Oh, wow.
He's always been a guy that's of service to everyone and set such a great example. Very sweet guy, very talented. When you know his kindness, you're like, and then you see his rock and roll stuff, especially back, with
yes,
famous girlfriends. He had Laura Branigan and he had Roseanne. We did used to share about that, but he's a talented guy, very kind. He's beloved in my world, and I'm just I was happy anytime we get a call from Sophie Walden. That's a good day. And he said that his gal friend Vicki had a show, and I go, I'm in. He goes, I don't know if you do interviews anymore, which makes me think he doesn't watch me. But I said, yeah, that'll be fun. And then I researched you and what you do here, and you have a lot of great musicians on here, older gentlemen like myself. So and, you're quite a character yourself. So I am honored to be here.
Oh, you are the sweetest. And I've been listening to your podcast, your divorce, your divorce party podcast, which you're able to do during this strike, which we'll talk about. So did that come about as a therapeutic thing? How did that happen?
Very therapeutic. I've had one date in 6 years, and I was picking up the kids at school in the parking lot. That's where you find your dates if you're ever see a woman with kids similar age. Most of them are much younger than me, but my kids are 10 and 7. I'm 64. But you're like, if I ever have a date, I want to be with, and you watch the moms, you're like, oh, she's amazing. And so there was a woman, and she'd said something nice about me on the radio, which is always good. And we had a lunch, and she was going through a divorce. Well, it's my Monica Casey, who's my co-host on the show, and she was going through a divorce from a guy from CSI, and it was public, and I had my thing, which is still going on, of course. But we got together, we talked about what we were dealing with, and like having our little support group there, and it was very cool. And so she's on the other side of it with her ex. By the way, as soon as I saw who her ex was, I looked him up on the internet. There's a picture of him without a shirt on. I'm like, okay, I got no shot.
But you are looking fine. We're going to talk about that too.
I do look fine, but what she did was she kind of went through this and the divorce court, all this stuff, and then she had her friends threw her a divorce party, and she did everything she wanted to do. They went and sang karaoke. She got drunk. She threw up. She made out with a guy. I'm not sure. But it sounded like a lot of fun, and she had, and so she's been sort of a divorce Sherpa for all of her friends. She was the first person in her group to get divorced, and a lot of times, people love you, but when you get divorced, they're like, oh, that might be contagious. I don't want this. And so, I've been divorced 4 times, so I'm an expert at it. But she was telling me about this divorce.
Twice for me, by the way.
Twice? Okay, well, you're getting there. But yeah, and I thought, well, wouldn't it be great if people, you got these weddings, elaborate weddings, you get bar mitzvah, and you all these things. What if divorce party became a part like of the recovery from and then moving on? Because how do you know you can move on, especially when you have kids? You're always thinking, well, I'll wait till they grow up. Well, but when my kids are grown up, I'll be dead. And I tell you, he has a lot of interesting friends. I brought on some friends that are comics or writers, and then like this week we had a Reiki master. Is that how you say it? And that woman, that conversation, so it was great for me to understand because my thing is always like, my sobriety is number one, my mental health, which you got to do if you have kids. You have to be. It's like when an airplane loses its pressure, you're supposed to put your oxygen on first, then
right.
And I'm also trying to figure out how you get on the other side of a divorce when the other person, we're powerless, and it keeps going. And I've spent a lot of time. We had a toxic marriage and a toxic 6-year divorce custody thing, and how do I get still, because you lose your creativity, you lose everything because you kind of focus on this thing, and the woman was very cool about that and things to do. We had a high conflict divorce therapist. We've had divorce attorneys. We've had some very funny people. And I'm shocked how honest people are.
What do you mean?
Well, they share even if they're on the other side of it and things, or even if they're in another relationship, they share very honestly about what it was like and what, I think people tend to go, okay, that's over. I never want to talk about it. I'm just going to look at the great things. But I think it's helpful to also go, here's the mistakes I made. Here's the mistakes that were made in front of the children and things like that. And, I thought of you because one woman, she was married to a guy that does what Snuffy does. And they got married young. And then he had this job where you have to be away. Back in those days, you had to be in a studio all the time,
right?
TV and movies, and then he decided, and they had a kid, and she basically raised the kid by herself because this guy naturally has to get his career going, which
right?
A lot with people, and then he decided he met another woman, and she was so funny because she's like, now everything I did was preparing. Setting it up for her. And it was very funny and very true. And I think a lot of men back in the day, things are different now. But the thing was, okay, the man's going to go out there and conquer the world. The woman stays home with all the kids, takes care of all that stuff. And then everything will be fine. And everything is not fine. Mm-hmm. And I always feel sorry for guys that don't, because it's not just that they're, they get out of the work or whatever, but the experience of being a father, the day-to-day minutia is amazing. And you don't get that. You go and get one shot at this. The kids are only young for a certain amount of time. And to think, well, when they're 25, I'll come back, So I feel sorry for people men and women that don't get to experience that. Because
you're really taking this fathering very seriously. I can see that all over the place.
I've never been more comfortable around human beings than I have my kids. And
isn't that lovely?
I would say I wanted to be a father, and it took a long time to get there. But it's a good thing I did because it's on. It's really not. And I've done a lot of cool stuff, Vicki. I've done a lot of movies and this and that and stuff. And I partied. I've done whatever. And but it's over. But it's okay. I like, everything about this. It's hard sometimes.
How are your kids handling? I love that you're so thoughtful, Tom. This is not the first time we're in the same room. So the first time we were in the same room was when Shep Gordon had Supermensch, and you were interviewing him. Do you remember that?
I do. Shep Gordon, there's a great human being. And Shep Gordon now has children. And
yes.
He's got one young son. I mean, he always dreamed about being a father. Now he's taken other people's kids and took care of them their whole lives, like a grandfather or whatever, when their parents had issues. And he always wanted to be a dad. And we made Supermensch. It's about the legend of Shep Gordon. It's a documentary about Shep. and it's his crazy, interesting life. Mike Myers directed it. Mike and I known Shep a long time, and so it was a big honor. That my last ex-wife and I got married at Shep's house. That's in there, unfortunately. And Shep got married to a woman, and he went through a thing where, they're going to have kids and everything. And then she said, I've decided not to do that. And she did some other shenanigans. And so I think he felt like, well, it's over, my window. But he met this new woman, and I think he's got a 4-year-old son, perhaps, and he is, loving it because he's all focused. He's a big rock and roll manager and all this stuff. He still works with Alice Cooper. They're ridiculous together, but in that travel around all this stuff, and now they're up there living in Maui, and he just loves the everyday. It does keep you young too. And I heard his wife, they might want to have another kid, and but he is, he's killing it, and he's 10 years older than me. That gives me hope.
Well, this is crazy, Tom. When I interviewed Shep, I had a podcast at the time, and it was on the radio, and I interviewed him. And the next day, I was in LA. He was in Hawaii, in Maui, and the next day, I was in Nobu in New York, and he was sitting at the table behind me.
Oh yeah,
that's kind of crazy stuff right there. Yeah.
As you know, his house in Maui is a central. Everybody goes there to see Shep, and he has little dinner parties. He loves cooking. He loves food. He
has a restaurant there. Snuffy and I were supposed to go to Maui in October. We just changed the plans because of what's going on. But yes, he has a restaurant, right?
And, he's the first person I called when I heard what was going on there to see how he was. He lives on the other side of Maui, but there's going to be a point. I mean, it's just awful what happened. Awful. But there's going to be a point because tourism pays a lot of their bills there. And so right now they're in the middle between don't come here. We got all this.
Right.
We got it. And then but come back. And, Maui's my favorite place in the world. And so when it's appropriate, the kids and I will go back there.
Okay. But now the reason that I brought this up, Tom, is because that was in 2013, I think it was, that you were doing that interview. And do you remember it? It was in a movie theater, and you were interviewing Shep, and Mike was there. Mike Myers was there, and it was a big audience, and we were SAG-AFTRA people in there, actually. Might have even been before the merger, or I don't remember. But in any case, you had a hard time that day. You were very different. You were in a different place.
Yeah.
And maybe there might have been some substances involved at the time. And the audience was giving you a hard time.
What town were we in?
We were in LA.
Okay.
We were in LA, but you were the reason I bring this up is not to say something negative, but because I'm so incredibly impressed with who's sitting before me today. You are a completely different human being in every way, shape, and form than that man that I saw before me 10 years ago.
Still time, but
no, not only in your demeanor and in your attitude, but your look. Okay, so how did you lose? Did you?
Number one, I just want to tell you, my sobriety journey has been a journey, and some of us relapse is a part of our story.
Yes.
I don't want to relapse and die, which could happen at any time. But before I met Snuffy, I had gone to rehab, 1989. I haven't drank since December 10th, 1989. And that was my sobriety date.
I
was 19 years sober.
Oh.
I got cocky because I was like, I'd sponsor guys that were opioid, heroin guys. And I'd say, no, that's not my thing. My thing is cocaine and booze. So I don't understand. I wrecked my motorcycle out of PCH, 19 years sober, and I broke my back. And I remember the ambulance came, I could hear it coming, and the guy gets out, he said, "Are you in pain?" I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Not anymore. Give me a shot of fentanyl." And I remember in my mind, that's what I need. I was wrong. I need this. And then at my 20 years sobriety, I was going to take a cake, and I went, oh, I'm still on the pain medication. This is like a year and a half. I'm not sober. Um, and I ate the cake, of course, but then I started over. And the problem was that I had to have several surgeries, and so I'd be taken off opioids, and then all of a sudden I have to prepare myself to come back on, and whatever the thing is, and then I ended up going to, back to rehab for that, and then about 7 years ago, I went to I needed money, of course. I still do, of course. And I did this show, this reality show that was in South Africa, and it would only be showed in Australia. It's like a get me, I'm a celebrity, get me out of here.
Mhm.
And I knew that I wouldn't be able to talk to my kids. By now, my kids were born. They were, I think my son was born in 2013, and my daughter in 2015. But needed the money, tried to make the marriage work still at the time, and what it was is you get an airplane and you parachute out in the middle of the world's largest game reserve by yourself with nothing. And I remember, there's no contact with the outside world. And I remember thinking, you know what I need? I need to get some Xanax. I need to be my own, and I need to take just in case I get, and again, try to be my own doctor. And I said, I need to get 90 because who knows how long I'm going to be stuck in Africa. Anyway, benzo became my thing. And then a month after I got back, I went to knock on wood, my final rehab to deal with that. And, getting off of coke or opioids or alcohol, I mean, you could do that. Those all seemed easier to me than benzos because that was a tough, weird thing to get off of.
Have you seen Painkiller, the new we're not supposed to talk about this, but I'm not promoting it. I'm just as a but anyway, it's Matthew Broderick and it's the new one. Michael Keaton did that great one a couple of years ago.
A buddy of mine, Danny Strong, did Dope Sick, which was
yes, fabulous. Is it like that?
I have to watch Painkiller. I have to catch up, but I watched every episode of that one, and it was just like that.
Wow.
And I grew up in Iowa. My younger sister was the biggest drug dealer in America. Like,
so I hear meth was her drug of choice, huh?
That was her documentary series. And people would ask me, was it embarrassing that your sister was a drug dealer? And I'd say, not when I was doing drugs, it wasn't. It was and she called me Thanksgiving, and there were 7 of us kids, so dad, raised by a single dad, and she had this big leather purse with her gun and her drugs in it, and she'd come in and kind of do like this, and we'd all go out to the garage, get up, go through, and she'd say, well, what do you want? And I'd say, well, what do you got? And she'd say, everything. And I'd say, that's what I want. I want it. And so she's doing good now. She's been out of she went to prison twice, and doing good though. And so knock on wood, we're all doing well. But that's that Dope Sick, and I'm sure Painkiller.
So Tom, what was your bottom this time? What got you to? What got you there? What got you to get off of them?
Of each thing, well,
of this thing specifically that was so hard.
First was the booze. I had moved to LA and I was getting married to Roseanne, and I was writing on the show. And I remember when I first moved here in 1988. And Roseanne and I known her since 83. I was 23. We used to go around and do comedy together and party together. And I moved out here, and first day I met a drug dealer that sold quantity, and I thought that's the way to get coke instead of little bullshit. I'll say anyway, after a few months, Roseanne said, "Hey, do you do this all the time?" And I said, "Yeah." "You drink and do drugs every day?" I go, "Yeah, pretty much." She goes, "That's bad." I go, "Is it?" She goes, "No, I thought you only did it when we got together every couple months or whatever." I go, "No, I do it every day." And then, and at that moment, I was like, I got to hide that from her. I mean, I didn't go, "This is bad, I should quit doing this." I went, okay, now I'm gonna have to hide that. a lonely business. I haven't done drugs in front of people since 1988, maybe, or 87, or drank in front of anybody. So all of my
Wow.
this was very by myself, and all the other stuff was by myself because I couldn't let that secret get out. And it's a hell of a way to live. I'll tell you that. It's exhausting and complicated and very sad. And I'm grateful that today I'm not living like that.
Tom, well, I was talking about this with some addicts today about, I'm a sober woman, about trust and honesty, and about getting sober kind of gives us the permission to finally get honest and real. Was it hard for you to get real? Are you able to be real now? Are you able to straight talk?
I think I am. I think this is my best 7 years of sobriety I've ever. I think I realized. I looked at my kids too, and that was very helpful to go. And I knew the marriage was, and I was like, I got to be here. I've got to, from this day, I've got to do this. It was rough at first. It was rough a day at a time, like we say, and then all of a sudden you get a year, and you go, things are better, and 5 and 6, and you can feel your brain healing, but you also got to be aware that this disease is still trying to kill me. There is lurking around, and I have my hands full with the kids and all the stuff and all the legal stuff, and but there's times I go work on the road, and I really make a conscious effort to run into some fellow recovering people. Which, by the way, when I used to do drugs, I thought everybody did drugs. Now I think everybody's in recovery. Next week I go down to Georgia and speak at the School of Addiction there. It's a great organization, and you go around. You've had the opportunity to make these speeches, share your stories. There's some people that they got arrested, like my sponsor now. He got arrested once 40 years ago and never did drugs again. And there are people like that, smart people. But there's others that have, we have a different journey. And I will say this to people that have had relapses. I mean, there's nothing braver than when you're sitting in a 12-step meeting and someone, you go around, I got 42 years, I got 30, whatever, and a guy goes, I got 4 days. I mean, that stops you. That honesty, it takes your breath away to somebody, because it's hard to go back.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to do it. It's harder to go back than it is to stay sober, but you got to do it. You got to understand, no judgments. And I think what happens is there's people in people's lives that mean well, that are not addict alcoholics, that don't, they're, and a couple things happen when you truly get sober. One, it messes the whole, if you've been together the whole time, and drugs and alcohol are a part of this, and you're sort of the bad guy, they're the good guy, that when all of a sudden you get it together, that throws the whole relationship off. That's why.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not their fault, but they don't know what to do. They think, I've got no job, I've got to still be the good guy versus the bad guy. And it's easy for people like us to feel like they're the bad guy. And if you have relapse in your story, the most important thing is, obviously, if you can stop shaming yourself, because that's number one, that voice constantly. But then you get to a point where people in your life that shame you, kind of start recognizing it. You go, well, I can't be a part of that. And this is, even if you've done damage to these people by, their fears about you dying or whatever, there has to be a point where you go, okay, this isn't it. You don't have to prove, because there's some people you could never prove that you got it together, that you're sober, that you're this and that, because they're much more comfortable the other way. But and that's the most important thing. And that's
what took you down this time. What got you to? Because you sound like a sober man to me today. How did you make? Was it the kids? And like I got sober. My daughter was 4, my son was 8. What I was late to the party. What made this the day? What made that the day? Okay, I'm doing this today.
I had I was, crazy and but I had to go to work and so I got up early in the morning to go film something. But I knew walking out the door, like I had a thing with their mom, and she was aware, it wasn't, but I knew that there was something different in my head. There was this, I'm going to get in the car and go driven out to work here and shoot this movie. It makes no sense, but then it's over. Something changed, and I'm going to have to work every day with it. My kids were small, and you do feel badly because whether you're not sober in front of your kids twice in their life or whatever, I think they know. I can remember, and this is after I was sober. My daughter, I done a Music Cares, hosted a Music Cares concert, and feeling pretty good about myself. Came home and the kids are upstairs asleep, and I'm in my office, and all of a sudden my daughter appears. She's 18 months old, and she's like, "Daddy, come to bed." I go, "Hey, I'll tell you what. You go back to bed, and I'll be up there in 5 minutes." And I went back to my computer. I look, and she hasn't left. She's staring at me, and I realized that this little human knows everything about me. She knows every lie. I didn't. She knew it. So we went upstairs, and then at that point, it is about being present. You can be sober and not be present, but at that point, I don't say it's going to be 5 minutes. I will say, what do I really need? I need 15 minutes, and then they put me on a timer, because it's easy for me to get distracted. But when you say 5 minutes, okay, but it works for them too, because when they come home from school, I'm like, what? Let's do the homework. 15 minutes. I go, okay, I'm putting you on a timer right here. When it goes off, we got to do the homework. So you hold each other accountable to those kind of things also.
Do they know that you are now a sober man and that you weren't before? Do they know that?
They're aware that I have an allergy to alcohol, and they're aware that I have a lot of sober friends, and they'll give me. I'll say, "Man, I need to do this meeting, guys, with my sober friends," and they like my time a lot, but they'll usually, my son will go, "Quinn, he needs that for his mental health." Your dad. It's really true. And when I go, like this is my sober meeting today, and I got to say I just something. But when I go a period of time, and you get, I could get things pretty dark, dark, depressed, the anytime you dealt with custody stuff, you dealt this stuff, and whatever the problems are, financial, whatever, it's easy for me to leap to the end. Okay, dad, homeless, alcoholic, right? And but what I've learned is one thing at a time. Do one active thing to get there, and maybe if you do 20, it will be. And the proof is that is true for me, because never, knock on wood, things have never been as I imagined them, and it's very satisfying to get up and go, well, what can I do about this situation? Okay, here's what I'm going to do right now. First thing, what do I not want to do about the situation? Who do I not want to talk to? What do I want? I'm going to do that first, and then I'll do the next thing and the next thing, because you got to be able to sleep at night. And that to me is, keeping on the straight and narrow, not only with not using drugs or drinking, but just kind of the way you live your life. And the kids, I've also live an honest life, and I haven't always done that. And we get very used to, when we have all that shame about the drugs, the alcohol, the way we're living, it's so easy to slip into this dishonesty. And a lot of people want to believe, they don't want to hear how we really are. They want to think, oh, everything's great. Everything's great. Oh, good. I wanted to hear that. And so I'm lucky. The kids are lucky. I definitely use them at first. But, there's something I learned in rehab at my first one. And I was only there 30 days, which I didn't recommend saying. But in 1989, because Roseanne had we were supposed to get married in January of or 1990. God, it's so long. And I wrote on the show, and I went. She confronted me about it, but she was kind about it. And I got in the cab, went up, and then like the second day there, my job was to go get the newspaper, bring it up to. I could see that we were. It was in the newspaper. We were broken up. I'd been on cocaine. I wasn't on the show anymore, and the marriage was off. Like that's how I learned about it. And at first, so I was like, oh, Christ, you know how your head goes. What do I got to do to fix this? But about the 8th day in there, and this is the thing that saved my life many times. The 8th day in there, they start talking about, would you consider doing this for yourself? Because I have tried to get sober for women or jobs or whatever, my family, and I never considered doing it for myself. Like, why do I care about that guy? And it struck me like, oh, I would like to do that. And I got a picture of myself when I was 4. And because this guy you don't like. They say, when they go, oh, you got to love yourself. Give me a minute. But I love that kid, this 4-year-old kid, man. He had nobody looking out for him. And he went through some shit. And he is me. And I've also got to take care of him now. He doesn't deserve to die of have this tragic life. And so I use that a lot. And I remember I called Roseanne. I said, listen, I love you. I appreciate you. I understand why we're not getting married, why I'm not working at the show anymore, but I'm going to stay here for myself. I'm going to finish this one. And she's like, oh, we're getting married. And my addict mind went, shit, I should have just led with that, not felt it. I should have just lied right away. Like, I'm doing this myself. If I'd have known, I could have manipulated her that way without actual feeling of doing something, I would have just said those words. But that has stuck with me a long time and still sticks with me, and especially when you see your children and you see yourself and they get to the age where horrible things happen to you as a kid. You're like, and I think when things happen when you're raped or when you're a kid or just physical abuse, you could get on the other side of it, But like I did, I went back in sobriety and found the pedophile from our old neighborhood.
I heard you tell that story.
Yeah. 30 other boys came forward, and I remember thinking, that's it. I put that thing, that is dead and buried.
Is it?
Well, when my son was born, and then he started getting to 4 years old, and I looked at him, and I'm like, "Are you going to be shitting me?" Because in the back of my mind, I thought, well, maybe I was a bad kid. Maybe I was ugly. Maybe something was up with me. Even though I knew better, but you don't want to think adults would do these horrible things to a kid. You want to kind of, I don't know. And I looked at my son. I was like, oh no, I was a baby, and he's perfect, and I was perfect, and those things happen. So I had to do. That was why I took the Benzos the last thing. It was like, I can't sleep. I have my own doctor. I'm going to get some Benzos because I can't sleep. I'm dealing with this stuff, and which, as you know, you can't deal with anything until you clear out the stuff. But yeah, that was the last, sort of traumatic thing that I got. You get on the other side of it, but certain things, because you don't want to live in your past. You don't want to fight the same ghosts over and over. And again, especially as a parent, because you got to be present for them. So my thing has always been, let's deal with the stuff that happened when I was a kid, the this, the that, and then that way I could really hyper focus on my own children and keep my eye out for things and just give them a bunch of positive attention.
Tom, just for the record, my kids were a little bit older than yours when I got sober, and my son is 29, my daughter's 25. She started law school at USC this week. They have absolutely no memory of me being anything but a sober woman and going to meetings and being of service. And speaking of being of service and doing all of that, I know you do a lot of that, and you've made that a big part of your life, even when you weren't completely sober, right? You've made that a big part of your life.
I want to say this too. I'll tell you another thing. There's nothing more powerful than seeing another sober man or woman say, my dad or mom has been sober for whatever period of time. We went through some rough stuff, maybe the kid, but they've been sober. That feeling, you see it in the child, and the child may be an adult, But then to say that, because that's not something that happened with me. My mom ended up dying and so I'm very grateful about that. Another thing to say in my life, I've never stopped going to 12-step meetings, even when I was fucked up, and I didn't. First of all, I'm not fucked up because
what was that like? Well, what is that like when you're fucked up and you're in a meeting?
I have a broken back. I'm not doing illegal drugs, and it's a good thing. I have it. There was a meeting I started in my house 20 or 33 years ago that's still going. And I still know a bunch of the guys that we still get together. And that has saved my life, that I continue to go and be with. And then when I got to a point where I would stop lying to myself and go, shit, and then you just got to go back. And the being of service part is very selfish for me because that I've never, and Stuffy Walden, I'm sure nobody's been more of service than Stuffy, or I'm sure you. I mean, Stuffy's a legend. Let's be
Stuffy. Okay, so you met at a meeting? Is that where you guys met?
I can't remember. It was probably at a meeting, and then he ended up doing music on Roseanne. And but he had there's a lot of people that I respected with a lot of respect for Stuffy, and then he helped me. He still does. Anytime I hear from him, his kind voice, and he just has great, solid advice. And I was with him through my divorce and through this other stuff, and he's amazing. But being of service, that's another thing. I never go, man, I wish I would have taken the time to do that. My self-esteem, and I'm talking about service work within the addiction community, but also just in.
But you do it out in the world also. I know that you do the Ed Asner poker tournament. You do a lot of stuff out in the world as well.
Again, it's selfish. I have a heart camp, the biggest heart camp in America for kids with heart defects and heart disease, Camp Del Corazon out in Catalina, and I've done it for 20 years, and it's amazing. It started before I had kids, and I would see. I started before I knew I had heart disease and heart failure. I have several things, cardiomyopathy. And I used to, selfishly, you do get to know the best doctors. And you do this. And then when I did have kids, I was so grateful that my kids were born healthy, and knock on wood. But the camp saved my life. This is no shit. I was out there 15 years ago, and I was in the med tent. We're below sea level out there. It's a great place for a heart camp. And our new pediatric cardiologist, I was hanging out with the nurses. All of our counselors are volunteer nurses, and they are the best. They're better than the doctors. They're more fun. Because we do the kid stuff, then we go up on this hill and do have adult conversations, and they're just funny and they kill it. And I was in there with them, and the new pediatric cardiologist, I was weighed about 320 pounds. I was eating a pork sandwich. I was breathing hard and sweating. And he looked at me and said, holy hell, have you ever had your heart tested, Tom? I go, my heart is great. It's very fast and loud. I can't even hear the side of the camera now. He's like, come down to UCLA tomorrow. We want to run you through some tests. And so I went down there. They do all these tests and shoot some blue nuclear dye, do all these things, which I highly recommend. And they're like, okay, tomorrow you come back in, we're doing a angioplasty, which I wasn't even sure what that was because I had blockage, put some stents in me. And so I told the nurses, my buddies, how to go, Big Tommy. That's my camp name, Big Tommy. I go, well, wait, great. Well, sadly, because I wanted them to fall in love with me. And I thought the best way to get a woman to fall in love with you is to have her feel sorry for you. I go, yeah, I got to go back tomorrow to get some stents. Going back there by myself. And they're like, we'll show up. And 8 of them showed up. This is no shit. And lay on the table. By the way, do this, men or women, just go and do it. It's not a big deal. You lay on a table. I was laying on this table, and they're all behind the glass. Hey, we love you, Big Tommy. You kind of taking pictures. And all of a sudden, my male nurse whips my sheet down and starts shaving my balls. And which is fine. That's his job. But, buddy, give a brother a fucking heads up on this stuff, because there is a rule. There is a unspoken rule where you give me, if you're like, hey, about 10 seconds, your shit's going to be out here. And so, you know what, you with 10 seconds with your hand under a sheet, you get some fucking blood flowing. But those nurses saw it ruined it. They did not see my show penis. They saw my battle penis. And, that's one of our, but it saved my life. And it saved my life again and again. I had heart failure 3.5 years ago, organ failure, and I woke up there at UCLA, and there were all the guys, pediatric cardiologists I know from the camp, and they brought in the best people and figured out a way to get me back up and running. And then you're talking about my weight loss. You say, what's the best way to lose 80 pounds? Well, have a stroke or what? Like I should have I gained so much weight during COVID. That's my excuse. And the kids are homeschooled. And, you know, I'd say, well, I don't take my shirt off in front of anybody except my kids. So what is the pressure? But I was giving them a bath January of 2022. And we do a thing where getting kids in the bath is hard. Getting them out is hard. That's a whole, and it was a school night. And they said, can we both get in there together? I go, yeah, let's do this thing. And then I do a thing where I turn around to the door and count to 10. Whoever, when I turn back around, is out of the tub first wins. So when I counted to 10. When I turned back around, my right eye felt like a curtain came down, just completely dark. And I thought maybe I punched myself in the eye or whatever. I get the kids in bed, and then I go on Google to see what the hell, because I was supposed to fly to Alaska the next day to start this pilot. And I was like, I'll just go to Alaska. That's, I'll deal with it up there. It might be a floater. That's what. But then I thought, well, you know, I'm a dad. I'm going to stop by the eye doctor on the way to the airport. And they came back and shot some dye at me, and came back and said, you've had a stroke. And I'm like, fuck, because you don't want to hear that. I mean, you think about hearing that, but to hear it, and they're like, you have
no paralysis.
No, but it was a very small. I went right over to UCLA. They do 24-hour stroke protocol, and they do all this, check your neurology, check every bit to see if it was a precursor to something major. And you know, when you're laying there on the table at the ER, there's a list of strokes 1 through 10, and they say, which stroke do you feel like you had? And it was a 1, a very
thank God.
But you get up to number 7, and shit's happening. You know, it's like I did that show Hot Ones on the internet, where you're supposed to drink the hot sauce, you eat the hot sauces during your interview on chicken legs, and you get up, you think, oh, I got this, I can eat these hot sauces. Then you get to number 7, you're like, holy shit, something is fucking awful. And I'm very lucky, and had a day to, and then I realized I got to get my shit together. This guy I spoke to him at Arnold Schwarzenegger's house, Charles D'Angelo, great big muscular dude, and he'd asked if I wanted to work with him. This is 2 years before, and he'd give every so often go. I go, no, I'm not ready for that. And then I called him and I go, I'm ready for that. I think I'm gonna. And he told me in February of 2022, by July of 2022, that because I was going to be working with Arnold Schwarzenegger on his new show FUBAR, which is a Netflix series, which is a little like True Lies, the movie you did get. He goes, do you have any goals? I go, I'd like to be at my True Lies weight from 1994 when I do that show with Arnold. I think that'd be fun. And I was actually lighter. You just have, you cannot, in my head, you don't lose 80 pounds. Like I'm not on Ozempic or whatever it's called, or anything on meth. I'm not on meth or whatever, the easy tool. But just by changing the way I ate when I ate and sticking.
Okay, so tell. What does it look like?
First thing in the morning, I get up and do my cardio. And it sometimes has to be very early because the kids.
What's your cardio?
Right, I do an hour on the elliptical.
I have one right there. Okay.
Outside, it's so freaking hot, but I do that, and then I can have a protein shake that he's created with no calories in it, and some strawberries in it, and mix that up, drink that. Then you can have that some almonds, and then at lunch I got to have a half a Subway sandwich, which to me one of my fears is I'm not going to be able to. I'll be traveling and I can't find what I need to eat on this diet. But you can find a Subway sandwich and a whole wheat. And then in the afternoon, I had this Dannon light yogurt.
Wait, what's your Subway sandwich? Is it like turkey with nothing on it or something?
Oh, you have all the stuff on it. You can't have cheese, but I would have that much turkey because you have and it's on whole wheat, which I thought was interesting.
And can you have like you can't have mayonnaise or anything like that.
Mayonnaise, you can have it how it is.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to stick to it. That's why you have one bag of baked potato chips. Like that was such a treat for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then to do the yogurt in the afternoon, and then at night have a big piece of chicken and vegetables or fish and vegetables. And then you have to have a all fruit popsicle. I forget the brand. It's a really good brand. Before you go to bed, you can't go, okay, I'm tired. I'm not going to have that thing. You have to eat each thing. There are 6 times during the day.
Wow.
And you have to weigh yourself every 2 weeks. And you do a Zoom with Charles every 2 weeks. He works with there's a lot of fat doctors. Which is my men's health doctor is just huge. And he's always like, wow, how did you do it? I'm thinking about taking this Ozemba or Mal, whatever. And he's worked with a lot of people. He's out of St. Louis, and you can do this Zoom. I was worried I was going to have to train with him at first, or meet somebody at a gym, which I don't like doing. And I don't mind sweating my ass off here, but everything has been good. And then keeping it off, July 4th, I had it off for a year. The way I worked before, when my son was born, I was so big, and I saw him being born. I was like, I got to live for this guy, and I lost 100 pounds. But what I did was the second I got to 187 and a half, I'm like, that's over, and just started, whether consciously or subconsciously, and it's something I've done in my life where became very focused on something, and then hit my goal. It's like a wrestler or a boxer where they hit their weight and then they start gorging. And so then it comes back and, slowly but surely. But, my mental health, doing that cardio, man, and staying on this thing.
Do you still eat the same thing every day?
I don't. I don't have the Subway. I mean, I'll have a sandwich and if I get over 205, he'll say, just have salad with a little bit of chicken. Let's do, because he wants me below 210, which I like, and holds me accountable. But then he'll change up a little bit. But I've never missed my cardio or my shake or my yogurt. And in the evening, there has been a couple times where I had cake on a kid's birthday.
I was going to say, have you cheated at all? There's been not a slice of pizza or anything like that?
I have, but I've been aware, okay, this is, because the old me would eat the whole cake. And the kids would say, Daddy, you get up at night and you go in the kitchen, which I used to do, and you'll eat our cake or you'll eat, so they were, I put things to say no, in case I was, you're tired and you're like, oh, I can't fight this. And, it's also a good thing to do to show your kids. Before I can get them to get in shape or be super healthy, I had to show them. I think in all aspects of your life, it's much easier to show your kids how to be a good person, how to be kind, how to be empathetic, how to be healthy when it's you. And I think we grew up in a generation of parents who are like, oh no, you do this. I am not. I'm going to smoke like my parents smoked, it's just a shit ton. And did all this stuff. And we really want the best for you, but we're going to do this other stuff. And
right.
It's emulate their folks. I grew up, I wanted to be like my dad. He was a very kind, nice man. And my mom was married 7 times in our small town. Alcoholic, addict, whatever. Didn't raise us. And I was
your mom left when you were
4. Yeah. And my dad, I said, I'm going to be like him. But as I got older, I realized, oh my God, I'm starting to be like her. And it's, I left when I was 4. My parents were very young. They were 16 and 18, and she didn't want to be a mom. I mean, she just said, and she would say stuff like, "I'm not maternal. I just want you to know." And the way that my relationship with her and my younger sister Lori and Scotty, my dad when he was 22, he had a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old, and so but I'm
Wow.
grateful about that. But my mom was just not like people in her town called her mom. Like she worked at all these bars and did stuff. And my sister and I, the first booze we ever drank was with visiting our mom or drugs or whatever we wanted. And yeah, she just had this, way. I remember she came to visit. Once in a while, she came to visit. It was kind of it's a big deal. I was sitting there, and she goes, "Oh, you're about to lose a nut." What my testicle? I had it. I don't know if I had underwear out, and it was just so. It sticks with you. It's so humiliating, but also a weird way to talk from your mom. But that's how she was, and I knew like she's not a mom. Like you
Didn't
know,
she give your sister permission to marry at a ridiculous age, or
made her do it.
she made her?
When I was 15, I moved in with our mom because I was like, fuck it, I want to drink, I want to do drugs, I want to grow my hair, I want to have no rules. So that's really how it was. But I knew like she's not a mom. She didn't want to be a mom. She is what she is, whatever. But my sister is a year younger, Lori. She idolized her even as a kid, small kid. And my dad made one mistake. I'm sure he made other mistakes, but when she would come over just drunk and trashed and inappropriate, he would just laugh. It's in front of the kids. And and so my sister had this weird sense of reality, this alter where that's the hero. Even Dad thinks she's so funny, and
Wow.
something I've tried to do with my kids. If their mom does something incredibly inappropriate, which has happened with cops, with this, with that, but I don't want them to feel badly, but I do take a moment and go, okay, now what just happened was not okay. I don't treat people like that. I don't want you treat people like that. I would never let anybody else treat you like that. And then we move on because otherwise, kids think, oh, this is the way things are supposed to be. But my sister followed me over to mom's. She'd had a perfect life. Like she was just turned 14, great student, great athlete. And then my mom, who is her best friend suddenly, like really, like that, such a weird thing. Her drinking buddy, her drug buddy. My sister was dating a guy that was 22, and she was 14. And so my mom said, "Hey, I'm giving you 3 choices: break up with him, which you're 14. You're like, fuck that. I'm having him arrested, and that's not good. Or 3, we're going to Missouri, and you're going to marry him." And my sister's
Wow.
let's get married. So my mom drives him down to Missouri. My sister and this pedophile, and they get married. And then the next day, I remember hearing, oh, they're on the way to Missouri. I called my dad. We're trying to figure out how to get out of the highway to find them because I just knew this is the worst. And then Bob came home just wasted. And I go, where's Lori? And she goes, well, she lives with Bob now. Like her life was over. She, and the guy beat her up, and I had to go over there and get her and stuff. But once you've been married like that, once you've done that, it's hard to go back to the 8th grade. So she and my mom, became running.
Sorry for laughing. That's
It's very exactly true. And they became running buddies. And my sister got into drugs, and my sister's very intelligent. She was like, "Well, if I'm going to do drugs, and maybe I'll sell drugs. If I'm going to sell drugs, I'm going to be the best at it because I'm not
wow.
going to finish school." And then her next husband, she met this guy, Floyd, who was the captain of the Grim Reaper motorcycle gang. It's a big motorcycle gang, very badass guy. He died in prison, of course. 2 of her husbands died in prison, but she says, well, he's got this network of bikers that go out to the West Coast, go to that East Coast. It's Iowa, Tomo, Iowa, Interstate 80 runs right through here. Well, this is what we're going to do. We're going to start this huge business. And it was in the 80s when the economy was fucked. And so she started doing this. And then at a certain point, they go out to, she dealt with the Mexican mafia, and you had to buy your chemicals and get them. And then she went, well, wait, too many people are getting arrested. She's like, I will make it. Why am I relying on these other people? I can make this drug. And so they had a big farm.
Breaking Bad. She was Breaking Bad.
Had an underground lab. They hired a real
Wow.
chemist, and they used to make their own meth. Now, I knew, my sister would never admit to being an addict. And perhaps I was worse, more obvious. But she'd say, no, it's a business. But, it is an addiction. Even the business. She would drive around town, our small town, with a brand new Jaguar with dealer on the plates. And she did this thing that a lot of, she'd buy homes for her friends, like John Gotti. Like, he's great in the neighborhood. And she did a lot of that.
Wow.
Cops worked for her in our town. Our seventh
Wow.
was the chief of police, who hated me but loved Lori, and they worked for her. And so if you see the Queen of Meth documentary series, you see the DEA guy. The original, he's like, we knew we were coming in. We knew we were going to bring the battery grab. But we couldn't tell the local cops because they were all working there. So they had helicopters that come in, and she ended up going to prison, and I supported her and got her to great prison, the Martha Stewart prison in West Virginia, if there is a great prison. And then she came back home after 10 years and started doing it again. And that, if it's not an addiction, I don't know what the fuck that says. But since her last prison term, she moved to a different location, a little geography, and she drives a forklift and works very hard. And knock on wood, we're both alive. And so.
Wow. Wow. So speaking, since you mentioned her documentary, I know you have one project that you can talk about that you got a waiver from. We will talk about the strike for a minute, and then I'm going to let you go. But Underdeveloped. So tell us about that.
The show that I shot last year, it's like The Office, where they talk into camera stuff, but it's about a development studio, like a movie studio, where they develop things. And the different people that do different jobs. And it's really appropriate because there's a lot of greed like that with the strike. And the guy that runs the place is not a good guy. I'm in charge of the thing, and I worked with a lot of very fun actors. It was great fun. We got a waiver. It comes out the 8th of September, streams.
And why did they give you a waiver? Because it was.
Well, it's not affiliated with directly with one of the big studios, but also we signed the agreement, and at the time we'd asked for 11% increase and this and that, and the studios came back with 2%. But we signed the agreement for and we have to stick to it, even if they end up settling for 8%. This show is going to pay everybody, and then. Every studio, when we stream to Amazon and these other places, they have to pay the same thing, or they don't get to stream the show. So, I think that we felt in SAG that this is a way also to put pressure on the big studios. Like, there are people working; they've already agreed to the thing you won't agree to, and I know it's a little confusing, but we got a waiver, and we had shot it before, and so I'm very grateful about that. It's called Underdeveloped. A lot of great people in it.
So you have a lot of work that's about to hit that you can't talk about, but you can talk about the fact that you are doing stand-up, right?
Yes, and I've always done stand-up. I mean, I started with stand-up, and you and I were talking about Andy Kaufman when we first.
Please tell the story. You said you have a great story.
When after high school, I worked on the kill floor of a meatpacking plant for 3 years.
Wow.
So I wanted to go to college because I said to myself, if I get to the University of Iowa, they have a stage, a student union. If I could get to that stage, but I have to pay for it. And then about the third year, I'm like, okay, there are people here that have worked here. My grandpa worked at the meatpacking plant for like 50 years, and I can see people trying to figure out how people survive working here. But it was a good job, especially for my town. And they got married or whatever. And I had these dreams, and then I was like, I got to quit having these dreams. I'm never going to be in Hollywood. You can't even get to Hollywood from Ottumwa, Iowa. That doesn't even make sense. And I went out one night to our local disco, the jailhouse it was called. Disco got there in like 1983. It had been out. And I came out of there at closing time, and on the street corner was Andy Kaufman. Like, I was just shocked. The guy from Taxi, the great comic, was standing there in Ottumwa, Iowa, on Main Street. And I went over and talked to him, and he said he'd come to our town because we had a women's wrestling event, at our Coliseum. You know, wrestling is huge where I'm from, professional wrestling. He went there. He was staying 20 miles away at Maharishi International University in Fairfield, Iowa, learning about transcendental meditation. And he stayed
Wow.
wrestling show, paid the women to stay later to wrestle with him. That's what he was doing. His thing. And
Right.
the whole audience in school buses to Happy Joe's Pizza. Happy Joe's Pizza. And I thought that's what I want to do in my life. I want to be able to take the audience to Happy Joe's Pizza. But I also realized, oh, he got here from Hollywood. Like there must be a way to do the return trip. And so it gave me confidence that perhaps I could do it. And then I ended up going to Iowa and doing the open mic, doing comedy, and I've always done it, and I highly recommend it. And
How did you? I'm going to let you go, but how did you start writing? How did you study? What did you do? Did you just do it?
Iowa Writers Workshop is a world famous place where the names of the writers that have come out of there are massively huge, and the names of the instructors is world famous. And I took some classes. I audited some things there, but I wanted to just, I just started writing jokes, and maybe they were similar to what I'd heard of Richard Pryor or whoever. And but what happened is I'd open up for these real comedians who come down from Minneapolis, and I remember one comic. I said, "I love that joke. I'm going to do that next week." And he's like, "No, not how it works. You have to do your own." And is all my friends, 50 guys, we go in there, we drink Everclear punch with Gatorade Everclear, and they'd all come laugh for me, and everybody get up and leave before the real comedian came. And Joe, who's one of the guys I picketed with at the Roseanne lot last week, he said, "Hey, listen, if you could get your friends to stay for the real comedy show, we will offer you a job in Minneapolis at a comedy club." And I'm like, hell yeah. And so I got a trash bag with my clothes, got on a bus, showed up at that club, and the guy's like, wow. I go, I don't have a car or a driver's license for obvious reason. I'm actually very close to here, and I've only got $100. And he goes, why did you move here? I go, because I have a job here. He goes, oh, the job is one weekend for $17.50. That's all I go, well, shit, I'm here. So I went to the closest bar, got a job as a bouncer, and met a waitress that said, we're looking for a roommate. It's $100 a month, and just started, very, very lucky. And lived in Minneapolis 5 years. They had comedy clubs. You could do open mics. You could met Roseanne there. And the thing I learned from Roseanne was I started writing jokes for her. Like her character was so defined. She was such a great comic. And she said, yeah, I want you to keep writing jokes for me. And she went on, this is in 1983. In 1985, she went on Johnny Carson. And I remember watching it from back in Minneapolis with all my friends, received my buddy Roseanne, and she killed. And she did a couple jokes I'd written. I was like, wow, that's how it works. And then she said, I want to do a show. I want you to come out and write my sitcom because you know my character. And so then I was like, okay, now I'm not a comedian. I am a writer. I can write for other people. And then the second year, they're like, why don't you be on the show because you guys are together? And so I go, oh, okay, now I'm an actor. But I found that I've hired, a lot of people I'd hired from the Midwest to write on Roseanne and other shows. And I didn't know anything about show business. I didn't know. So there was another executive producer, and he would hire older time Hollywood writers, people that have been, and I'd hire these new guys, comics, and I knew they were funny. I knew they had points of view, and they didn't know how to write, but you could teach them the form of a television script. That's easy to do if you know what you're doing. And then you see these great, well-defined characters on the Roseanne show, and it was a lot of fun. We enjoyed it.
I could talk to you all night. I thank you so much for doing this. I have enjoyed this so much. You are delightful and so forthcoming and open. And I love the way you father. I love the way you sober. I love the way you're of service, and to me as well, and to my audience. Thank you so much for doing this. I hope I get to meet you someday.
Sure you will.
And thank you. Have a wonderful evening. Thanks so much.